Kent, they've had a fall of coins only a couple of years ago. In Russia, they had a fall of coins 10 years ago in which the coins were all bent in the middle, as if Uri Geller had been fucking around with them. But it was only a coincidence, it was only a coincidence, it was only a coincidence. There's a record of a farmer in England who heard a noise and went out to the stables, and he found all the horses were turned around in their stalls, and one horse was missing. So he hunted here and he hunted there. This is one of Charles Fort's cases. And finally he looked in the hay room, and the horse was in the hay room, even though the door was too small for the horse to fit through. I imagine he and the horse looked at each other with a wild surmise. I know I would have. Ice of various sizes continues to fall out of the sky. In England last year, there was an enormous chunk of ice fell on a golf course. Everybody on the golf course swore there was no airplane. One of the conventional explanations is that the ice falls off the wings of airplanes. But if you start researching it, you find these falls of ice go back long before the airplane. There was one in India in the 19th century where the chunk of ice was as big as an elephant. The fundamentalist materialists have attempted to grapple with this. The explanation is the segregating whirlwind. Most whirlwinds that people have actually experienced, that you can find records of, the whirlwinds pick up all sorts of things and just scatter them all over the place, and down come birth certificates, coffins, kitchen sinks, parts of barns, dogs, cats, and this and that. But to handle the falls of frogs, there's a theory has been invented that some whirlwinds practice segregation. And so they run across the countryside rejecting everything else and pick up only frogs, and then they run to the nearest town and dump the frogs there. This has been soberly proposed. This was proposed by some scientists in Greece in 1981 when they had a fall of frogs in Greece again. And they said it must have been a whirlwind that picked up only frogs. Although they did admit it was strange that the frogs were picked up by a whirlwind, hurled across space, dropped on the ground, and none of them were hurt. They were all hopping around in a very lively way. There are the cases of the alligators found in strange places. Everybody has heard about the alligators in New York sewers. There was an article in the American Journal of Folklore that had investigated the origins of that legend, and they found out that Consolidated Edison workers who work in the sewers have seen alligators in the New York sewers. I don't know if they got there the way the legend says, kids putting alligators down the toilet when they got too big to play with anymore. I don't know how the alligators got there. But a crocodile was found in Ohio once. Two crocodiles were found in England 20 years apart in a rural part of England. There's the Surrey puma, which has been seen in Surrey, England for over 20 years now. Photographs of it have been taken. Scratch marks have been found and identified by the RSPCA as the scratches of a large feline weighing over 150 pounds, and yet no animals are being killed by this puma. Real pumas eat 150 pounds of meat a week, but the Surrey puma doesn't eat anything. The world is much stranger than most people realize. That's what I was getting at. But let's sober up a bit and stop rollicking around with frogs and crocodiles and talking bunnies and UFOs and things like that. Let's look at hard science for a moment. The hardest of hard sciences is mathematical physics, and the crown of mathematical physics is quantum theory. Quantum mechanics is supposed to describe what the universe is ultimately made out of. And the two major conclusions of quantum mechanics are that the shorter the life of a particle, the more money it costs to produce it. And so you can always get more money from the government to find more particles, so there's always new ones being found. These very short-lived particles are the basic building blocks of nature, but they can only be produced in the laboratory at great expense. So the basic building blocks of matter don't exist in nature. What does quantum mechanics say about reality? Well, quantum mechanics is just like religion. You got different sects. You don't have any uniformity. The largest sect, that's sect, not sex. I'm not talking about copulation. The largest sect is the Copenhagen school, which says that quantum mechanics can't say anything about reality. The largest school of thought among physicists is the Copenhagen school. and they say we can't talk about reality. And this is stated quite bluntly by many physicists of that school. Physics does not talk about reality. It talks about what kind of equations are useful for us at this time. Questions about reality belong in somebody else's department. There are some physicists who don't like that. They say, why should we spend our whole life studying this subject if we can't say anything about reality at the end of all our study? So this minority has rejected the Copenhagen view and then started disagreeing with one another entirely about everything else. Among those who reject the Copenhagen view, there is the multiple universe people. This was started by John Archibald Wheeler and two graduate students named Everett and Graham at Princeton back in the 1950s. It's called the EWG model for Everett, Wheeler, and Graham. That's the order in which they put their names on the paper in which they proposed it. According to this model, everything that can happen to a quantum system does happen to it. This is one way of understanding the mysterious indeterminacy of quantum processes. So therefore, everything that could happen to any quantum thingamajig, and you can't say a quantum particle when you're among physicists because they have two models for what's going on inside the atom, the particle model and the wave model. They use the particle model on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and the wave models on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and on Sundays they're agnostics like me. But the thingamajigs, whatever they are, the thingamajigs that act like waves in some experiments and act like particles in other experiments, everything that can happen to them does happen to them. And since we're made up of these thingamajigs, that means that everything that can happen to us does happen to us. And the EWG model proposes this literally. This is not science fiction. This is a legitimate theory in modern physics. You thought it just happened on Star Trek, I suppose. Everything that can happen to a quantum system does happen to us, so therefore everything that can happen to the universe does happen to it. So therefore there are 10 to the 100th power universes approximately at this point, with new ones that are coming into existence every nanosecond with every new alternative. Every time you have a quantum alternative, both of them happen. So in the universe next door, I'm not here tonight because I was in a car accident on my way here. Isn't that terrible? It's sad to think about. Then there's another universe over there where I'm not here tonight because I never came to the United States on this lecture tour. I decided to stay in Ireland. And then there are other universes where I don't exist at all because my father never met my mother. I suppose there are universes where I was aborted. And every one of these is equally real, which is very much like the Mahayana Buddhist saying existence and non-existence are the same. I exist, but I also don't exist. One of the illustrations of this is the Schrödinger's cat paradox, about which I once wrote a novel, which a few people read. I think it was released on a need-to-know basis. Apparently, it wasn't quite published. It sort of escaped. I will be immodest for a moment and tell you that New Scientist called that novel